Good evening, everybody.
Kavod Harav, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, thank you. Yeah, so we're talking about the issue of bathing. Looks like we're in the middle of the Beit Yosef somewhere here. Yeah, so it says like this. Ve'aran katav bepek bet debetza. It says the Ran. וזה לשונו, כבר כתבתי בפרק קירה, I already wrote, it says in a different place, שבת י"ח, מה שנראה לי שלדברי רבותינו בעלי התוספות, according to תוספות, שאומרים דלכם האמינו ביום טוב לרחיצת כל הגוף, מדאורייתא אסור. So according to Tosfot, apparently, right, to heat up the water, to bathe your whole body, is forbidden from the Torah. בחמין שהוחמו מערב יום טוב, Nami Asur. So then, right, he says it will also be forbidden with water that was heated before Yom Tov. To bathe the whole body. Erev Yom Tov, Atu Yom Tov, because it's a decree of Erev Yom Tov, because you may come to heat up on Yom Tov. Right? But we did see before, by the way, that the Rif doesn't agree with this, right? He says it's allowed to do that. So it's just like we decree over there, Erev Shabbat, that may come to do Shabbat. But he says, right, since it's only rabbinical, so he says, therefore we rely on the Geonim, right, who permit this. So therefore he's also lenient, right? So what did he mean, the Ran here? What he meant to say was that according to Tosfot, apparently it's forbidden. But he says the halacha is not like that. The halacha is like the Geonim permit this, right? And we also saw that the Rif also permits this. So there you go. Okay. So then he goes on. Ve'agur katab b'shem teshuvat Rashba. Says this rabbi, right? L'asor aval, to forbid. Wow, interesting, right? So he writes the name of the Rashba that is forbidden. Aval samag pasak kedivri agon. But the samag paskins like the Gaon. Vechen pasak Rama, also the Rambam. פרק א' וכתב רב מגיד, כן, הסכמת מן הגאונים אפילו לרחוץ כל גופו. So he says that this is the prevailing opinion amongst the Geonim, and even to raise the whole body, right? כאחד, in one shot, וכן עיקר, so that's how Halachai says. So therefore the trend seems to be, right, that it's allowed to do this, amongst most of the authorities here. Okay, good.
Kavod Harav, when we bathe in, say we bathe in Yom Tov, do we have to do it with some sort of shinui, even though it's allowed?
No. Okay. You don't need any shinui because it's permitted altogether.
And what about, we do have, what about instead of bar soap, use liquid soap? Yeah, that
So the
is
Ashkenazim, they don't use bar soap.
right. We use liquid soap.
They don't
Okay.
use the Ashkenazim don't use bar soap, not on Shabbat and not on Yom Tov.
Correct. Yeah, we use liquid. I mean, to
Yes.
wash hands and so on, no? Okay.
So you can use liquid, you can use shampoo, right? Things like this. Yes.
Oh, okay. And when we dry, for instance, the hair, to take
Yeah.
careful not to squeeze, no, the water, no, or no?
You can do the normal way because it doesn't really, nothing is squeezed out there.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Thank you.
Unless you
Yes.
have a very thick hair.
I do. That's what I'm asking.
Right, but I'm saying it has to be like really, really thick,
Okay.
Otherwise, I don't think it's gonna happen.
Okay.
But
Thank you.
anyway, yeah, so even that, right, it's not really a problem. So, the truth is you can just take a normal shower, nothing really different there.
Okay.
But you're right about the bar soap. But the Sephardim, they use bar soap.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the story there.
Thank you.
Okay, God bless. So anyway, right, as we said, let's go on. The כתב מרדכי בית הביצה, right, says מרדכי, רבנו יהודה כתב דמותר לרחוץ תינוק קטן כדי תפק בתא דיומא. So this rabbi says, right, that also you're allowed to bathe a child. Like we say in last parak of Yoma, the tinokot mutarim berchitza besicha b'yom kippurim. You can even do them on Yom Kippur, it says. Wow, look at that. So it says there, right, that you can bathe them and anoint them on Yom Kippur. So yeah, it's allowed. Yeah. So even, by the way, on Shabbat, you're allowed to bathe. You're allowed to bathe a child.
And does this apply when they have the Brit Milah? I don't know if it's after the third day or something like that.
Even without that.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So let's go on. By the way, why is it allowed for the child? Because it's very beneficial to the health of the child. So therefore, the rabbis didn't decree on children. This is the reason why it's allowed. But as we said, right, you have to be careful about not heating water, right? You cannot heat water, obviously. So you got to use whatever you have. That's about it, right? That's all you can do. This whole discussion about that, by the way, what you can use, which hot water you can use, it's a whole discussion. I won't get into it right now because it's very complex a little bit. I mean, it's a lot to talk about there. Bezat Hashem, we'll get to that. Hopefully, right? One time we'll discuss the issue of which water you can use and so forth and so on. We'll discuss it. Bezat Hashem. But I just want to go on here. So it says that. But what we're saying here is that you can use water which was heated erev Yom Tov, right? Before Yom Tov. That's what we're talking about here. Okay, so let's go on. בכל מידי, דאית ברביתא דתינוק לא גזרו ברבנן. Exactly what I told you, right? He says that whatever is, beneficial to the child for his growth, right? For his, the rabbis didn't decree on that. So that's the reason why they allowed to bathe children. As we said, right? Even on Shabbat, even on Yom Kippur. Okay, well, there you go. So, וצריך עיון, כי נראה לי דלא גזרו על תינוק לרחוץ, אבל אסור לגדול לעשות הבהרה לצורך שום רחיצה, דהה אין שווה לכל נפש, right? So, he says, but on the other hand, right, you're not allowed to heat up the water, right, for this, as we said, for that purpose. So it has to be something which was already heated up. כתב הכל בו, מותר לאחם הרבה מן המים דומיה דממלאה אשר אישה כדרה בשר, ועל זה הורו חכמים הראשונים במקום שיש תינוק שיש צורך לרחוץ כל גופו, שנותנים מים הרבה לאחם ולהדיח הקערות, ומן השיריים רוחצים גוף. So it gives you a piece of good advice here, right? What's the proper way to do it? If you don't have any hot water, so he says what you do is, you heat up some hot water to wash dishes, and so forth, let's say, right? That you can do, on Yom Tov, right? Not on Shabbat, obviously. On Yom Tov, you can do that. So he says, you can heat up like a big pot, and then, right, whatever's left over, you can use to bathe the child. Okay. ומן השיריים לוחצים בין. תזכור גופו שנותנים מים הרבה לאחם להדיח הקערות, ומן השיריים לוחצים גופו כתינוק על כאן, וסיים בה באורחות חיים. So it says, right, concludes there, it's Rabbi, אבל במרחץ אסור, but it says, but as we said last week, right, that you're not allowed to do this in a bathhouse, right, only at home, right, basically, in a private bath. Right, even to bathe, just your face and hands and feet, in a bathhouse, not allowed. That's what he says. רחיצה בחמי טבריה, דין שבת ויום טוב שווה. וכבר נדבר במשפטם בסימן שכ"ו. So he says, regarding, bathing in hot springs, right, which is found in Tveria, right, which is like a northern town, right, close to the Kinneret, right over there. So, that, he says, it's talked about in this chapter 326, which is talking about Shabbat. So he says, right, the rule is the same for Shabbat as it is for Yom Tov regarding the hot springs. Okay, very good. So that's the whole discussion there, but I won't get into it now because we don't really have any hot springs over here in America. So yeah, we won't get into that too much. Not so practical. Okay, so yeah, let's go to Shulchan Aruch and see what's there. So yeah, it looks like I gotta bring it up. Maybe. Let's see. Just make sure if I don't have it here. Yeah, it looks like I gotta bring it up. Okay. So let me just check which chapter this is. Kuf Nun Gimel. No, that's not the one. That's not the one. Right, this one. Tav Kuf Yud Aleph. Okay. Tav Kuf Yud Aleph. Okay. So it says here, מותר לעשות מדורה להתחמם כנגדה. Oh, we did this already. So we can, We're doing bet. Okay. Bet. So it says here, מותר לאחם ביום טוב מים לרחוץ ידיו, אבל לא כל גופו, right? As we said, you're allowed to heat up water on Yom Tov to wash your hands, right? And all that stuff, but not the whole body. אפילו אינו רוחצו בבת אחד. Even if he's not doing it in one shot. But I have to point out that nowadays it may be allowed to do this because today we do take showers all the time and we wash the whole body, so it's not what it used to be. This whole thing here. So yeah, I think that there's definitely room to be lenient regarding this, but practically speaking, we don't really need it, and the reason is because with our systems that we have, the boilers and all these things, the water is being heated all the time, automatically. So you don't need to heat water for anything, if you have a boiler, right? But in Israel, the systems are a little bit different there. I'm not going to go into the whole situation in Israel there, but there are times where in Israel, you're like manually heating the water, pressing a button to heat the water. There is a thing like that in Israel. Here, you don't have that really so much, it's almost non-existent, right? So I won't get into it too much, but this Israeli situation. When we move there, we'll talk about it, when we okay. As you can see, I'm very eager to go there. So I have one foot on the other side there. So anyway, right, the point is that anyway, getting back to this halacha here, it says Rama here, אבל מותר לרחוץ תינוק במים שהוחמו על ידי ישראל. So it says, but as we said, right, you're allowed to bathe a child. If the water was heated even by a Jew on Yom Tov, he says. Good point. Okay, there you go. אבל אסור לחמם לצורכו אפילו על ידי אינו יהודי. Right, but he says for his needs, you're not allowed to do it, even by way of a goy. Well, the truth is, as we said, right, today things are a little bit different, but the point is like this, that you're allowed to bathe a child, as we said, right? That's the whole thing. Whether it's Yom Tov, whether it's Shabbat, whether it's Yom Kippur, even, right? As we said, right? Okay. So then he goes on, אבל כשצריך להם לבשל או להדיח, אז מותר להרבות בשבילו, right? So, as we said, right, the trick is that you can put like a big pot, and whatever's left over, you can use for the child. ודין חמי טבריה כמו בשבת. So he says, regarding the springs, right, it's like Shabbat. אבל במים שהוחמו בערב יום טוב, מותר לרחוץ כל גופו אפילו כאחד. But then he says, right, if the water was heated on before Yom Tov, so then you can wash your whole body with that, right? You can bathe the whole body, whether it's a shower, right, or a bath, whatever it is, right? מיהו דווקא חוץ למרחץ, אבל במרחץ אסור, right? But then he says that's only forbidden in a private, right, place, but not in the public bathhouse. There you cannot bathe over there on Yom Tov. And all the more so on Shabbat, right? You cannot bathe there. So yeah, that's the story. So now we have Shavuot coming up, right? So you got 2 days there. So if you feel like hot, especially you girls are in the south there, there's a lot of heat there. So if you get hot, whether it's the first day or even the second day, whatever it is, doesn't matter. It's all the same. You can take a shower, whatever. On Shavuot, right? But right on Shabbat, that's a different story. On Shabbat, you're not really allowed to take a hot shower. You could take a cold shower. But there are some exceptions, right? As the Rambam says, there's like 3 exceptions to this rule. So we already said one of them, right? Which is the child. The child can do it. You can give a bath to a child, hot bath. The second one is a person who's sick, if he's ill, right? Let's say he's got whatever, some kind of an illness, and bathing, makes him feel better, right? Whatever. So, let's say he's got like a fever, and it brings the fever down, whatever it is, God knows. So he's allowed to take a hot shower on Shabbat. And there's one more, right? Which is the mitzvah. So what is mitzvah? That means that a person is suffering, from the heat, so, or whatever it is, right? Some other thing he's suffering from. So if he's suffering, let's say he's sweating a lot, and can't take it. So they also allowed, for that purpose to take a shower or whatever on Shabbat. But on Yom Tov, you don't need any of these reasons, right? You can just do it, for any reason you feel like. Doesn't really matter. So Shabbat and Yom Tov are a little bit different, right? So what's the general rule, right? On Shabbat, cold shower, right? On Yom Tov, hot shower. Unless you're really, right, not feeling good, and the shower will help you, right? Whatever. So then it's okay. Okay, good. There was a whole discussion, by the way, since we're touching this subject, regarding, the hot water that you open up in the tap. I'll just give you a brief description of this, right? So you understand what I'm talking about. When you open the hot water in the tap, what happens is, right, that there's like a pressure, the water pressure pushes the water out of the sink, right, out of the tap. And what happens is that because of this pressure, hot water from the boiler, it gets, removed from there. I'm sorry, not removed. It does get removed, but that's not the problem. The problem is that cold water comes in, in order to get the pressure. The cold water comes into the boiler, right, the tank, and hot water goes out. So what happens is, right, that sometimes, could be very, oftentimes, what happens is that when that cold water comes into the boiler, it gets cooked, so because of this, many of the poskim, have written that you're not allowed to open the hot water tap on Shabbat. On Yom Tov, it's not a problem. But on Shabbat, they say don't open it. Why? Because you're bringing in cold water into the boiler, and that water is getting cooked by the hot water. So you're cooking, that's the thing, right? So the truth is, that now we became a little bit more lenient with this recently. Why is that? Because my rabbi, Maran Shalom, he writes in his book, Chazon Ovadia, that there is what to rely on, to open the hot water tap, So therefore, right, now some people are relying on that and, opening the hot water tap. But I would say probably most religious people, especially in the Ashkenazi world, they don't open the hot water tap on Shabbat. And there's a good reason for that, so whatever. But the rabbi was, he found like a way to allow this, right? He found all kinds of different interesting, right, theories about this, the tzirufim, we call that, right? Combinations in order to, right, allow this. So if you want to be lenient on that, you could, there's room to be lenient there. So what can I tell you, right? It is what it is. Okay, it's all discussion. If I would get into the depths of this whole thing, we'd be here all night until the morning. I'm not going to get into it too much. Okay, it's a little bit complicated.
Rabbi, excuse me.
Yeah.
You said Sirofin. Sirofin, that means several theories. Why not?
Right. So the word siruf in Hebrew means like you combine things, right? Combinations.
Oh, okay.
So what does that mean? You combine like different reasons why it's allowed, and you put them together, so it makes like several doubts. Like doubled out, tripled out, quadrupled out.
Okay.
Right, we call that in Torah, we call that safek seka, right? Doubled out. Let's say things like this, right? So that's what I mean by tzirufin. You combine all kinds of doubts and all kinds of things, and you make it allowed, to do that. So that's what the rabbi did, in his book. He got into the whole thing, with this, and he found he was he was a big man, with big shoulders, so he was able to find something. It's a big discussion, by the way, it's a long story, so I won't get into it now. But you know what? If you're in the mood, right, to discuss this with me, I'll tell you all the reasons. Give me a right to send me a text, right, and we'll get into the whole discussion.
Okay. Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah, that's if you want to have some fun, and enjoy, right, the Torah discussion, right? So let me know. Okay, it's quite interesting, by the way. It is quite interesting. Okay, whatever. It is what it is. Okay, so right, there is what to rely on, but as I said, right, a lot of people are stringent about that. Okay, so then, right, says the Ramah here. Right, so says Ramah that there are some who are stringent about this, so that's the custom. Now, so here's the thing, right? So it comes out that according to the Ramah, which is the Ashkenazim, right? You're not really supposed to bathe the whole body. So therefore, a lot of the Ashkenazim are stringent about this, not to bathe the whole body. But recently, right, there was Rabbi Feinstein, al Shalom, who was the rabbi of America over here. Big Chacham, he was big Chacham, right? So he was Ashkenazi, of course, So he writes that even Ashkenazim can do this today. So the question is, why is that? Right? So what he says is that nowadays the people take showers every day, so it's not really considered to be something like out of the ordinary, whatever. So he says, therefore, it is allowed. So Rav Moshe Feinstein, he did allow, even for Ashkenazim, right? Obviously, to wash your whole body. Right? So on Shabbat, he allowed to do in cold water, and on Yom Tov, he allowed to do in hot water. So a lot of people avail themselves of this, leniency of Rav Moshe Feinstein, because there are many places where the climate is very hot. So sometimes you really need to, get into a shower. You're like sweating. That's the way it is in many places, right? Especially where you girls live, right down there, down south over there. And also in Israel, by the way, same thing. Pretty much, right? It's hot there, so you gotta you have to avail yourself of all kinds of things to survive over there. Okay, so that's the story, right? Sometimes in New York, by the way, the summers are also very, very hot. So sometimes in the summer here, you also need it. There's really much no choice. Okay, that's the story. So good. Let's go on to Gimel. So this one we already discussed last week, but now we're seeing in the Shulchan Aruch. So we'll get into it a little bit. Right, so here's what the Torah says, right? Adam mutar litbol b'yom tov mitumato, aval asur liatbil kelim chadashim o tameim l'taharam. Right, so he says what you're allowed to do is to immerse, right, in the mikveh on Yom Tov. Right, we discussed that last week. So what does that mean? That even a man can do it, right? All the more so a woman, right, who has to, as we said, right, it's her mikveh night, right, whatever. So then, of course, she can go. But even besides that, right, even the men can go. Even though the men are not really obligated to go to the mikveh, it's only a custom, but still they can go. So says Bet Yosef regarding this, he brings a source for this, right? Perek Bet Betzah. Second paragraph Betzah, Yud Zayin Amud Bet. Tanan, Chal Yot Echad Achar Shabbat Bet Shammai Omrim Matbilin Et Akol Lifnei Shabbat ובית הלל אומרים כלים לפני השבת ואדם בשבת. So we have here two opinions brought down, right, in the Gemara there, in the Mishnah, right? There is Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai. So what are they saying? So it's saying like this, right? That if Yom Tov came after Shabbat, fell after Shabbat, Bet Shammai says, right, we can, what we do is we immerse everything before Shabbat. And Bet Hillel says, kelim, utensils you can do before. But people can even immerse on Shabbat itself. Okay. So then he goes on. It says in Gemara there, "Tikuli alma mihad kelim b'Shabbat lo." So it says everybody seems to agree that you cannot immerse utensils, right, on Shabbat. My tama, what's the reason why? Amar Rava gezerah shemei telenu biyado. So Rava says the reason is because, right, you may come to take it with his hand, and carry it in the street, right, without an eruv there. For amot, b'rshut harabim, public domain. Tenach Shabbat Yom Tov Mai, right? So he says, okay, Shabbat, I got it, but what about Yom Tov? Right, as we said, right, Yom Tov you don't need an eruv to carry. So what's the problem there? Yom Tov atu Shabbat. So they answered in the Gemara that they agreed on Yom Tov because you may come to do it on Shabbat. So therefore they forbade that too. That's one answer, right? Rav Yosef Amar Gezerah Bishum Sechita. So Rav Yosef says, no, the reason is because that you may come to squeeze it out, right? V'gazu b'kelim delav b'nei sechita yatu kelim she'en b'nei sechita. So they decreed regarding utensils which are not really, squeezable because of things which are squeezable. Rabbi Amar Gezerah Sheme. Rabbi says a different reason, third reason, right? Sheme Yesheh. He may delay, right? What does that mean? So Rava says because it looks like he's fixing a utensil, right? By making it usable, by immersing in the mikveh. Katav Rosh Vezal Zeshano Hevi Rif Tama de Rav Yosef De'amar Mishum Schita. So the Rosh, right, brings the riff that he brings the reason of Rav Yosef because of squeezing. The Tama de Rav Bibi De'amar Gezerah Shemei Yesheb. And that the reason of Rabbi who said that you may come to delay, the Shavik Tama de Rabba, and he didn't use the reason of Rabba. He said, right, the reason is because you may come to carry it in 4 amot in the street. So he says the reason of Rabba is because, as we said, right, that looks like you're fixing utensil. But so he says, I'm wondering why did he go out of his way to explain this Mishnah? Right? So לפי הטעמים שכתב מותר להטביל כלים חדשים ביום טוב. So he says, how it's relevant, right? That the immersing utensils nowadays, and he says, furthermore, according to the reasons that you're allowed to immerse utensils, chadashim b'yom tov, new ones, and yom tov, yukach nireh the tama de Rabba ikar. So he says, therefore, it seems like the reason of Rabbah is the main reason. The ilchata kibaten halachas hakim legabe Rabbi Yosef when he's arguing with Rabbi Yosef. V'chen matzinu ze hatam gabe shofar. So it says we find the same thing regarding shofar. Lulav and also Lulav and Megillah, same thing. V'chen Rabba batza'ah he. This is also another thing, which is that, right, Rabba is right like a later authority, right? Umeelu shnei hatamim asur yatzbil kelim chadashim b'yom tov. So she goes, because of these two reasons, forbidden to immerse utensils on Yom Tov. That's the end of it, right? Katavti zeh b'siman shin chav gimel. Says I already wrote this in the laws of Shabbat, right? In chapter 323. V'sham katavti sheyesh cholkin b'zeh. So I wrote over there. There are those that argue with this. Matirim latbil kelim kelei goim halekochim min hagoyim, right? And they allow to immerse utensils which you bought from a goy, right, on Yom Tov. V'sham katavti gam ken l'divrei osrim latbilam ma takana yaseh lahem. So he says also I wrote over there, right, according to ones who are stringent, how do you write fix fix the problem, right? How do you remedy the problem? There's a way to remedy. Yaseh lahem kadesh lishtamesh behem b'yom tov, to use them on Yom Tov. Ve'inyan heter tfilat adam mitbar b'siman shin chavav. So it says regarding immersing the person, right? It's explained in chapter 326, right? Regarding a person immersing in the mikveh and on Shabbat. So we already said regarding that, right? That in a cold mikveh there's no problem to immerse on Shabbat. The only question is about a hot mikveh, So there are some who have the custom, to be lenient with hot mikvehs that were heated before Shabbat. But it seems like the halacha is not like that, really. Halacha is that you should not go into a hot mikveh on Shabbat. I'm talking about for a man, right? But for a woman, as we said, right, if that's her mikveh night, she can go. No problem. Okay, beautiful. So and that's why, by the way, it pays to live in a religious neighborhood, because if you're married, right, and sometimes a woman has to go to the mikveh on Shabbat, as we said, right? So if there's no mikveh nearby, you cannot go, and then it's going to cause you a problem, So you can't be with your husband, on Shabbat because there's no mikveh around your house, right? So that's why it pays to live in a religious neighborhood, where there's a mikveh there, right? You can walk to, and right, all these things that you need, a synagogue, a mikveh, right? That a Jew needs to live his life. Right, so that's the story, So, okay. There should be a mikveh within walking distance, right, of a person's house. Here, where I live, we have at least 5 mikvahs over here in this neighborhood. So yeah, it's getting there. We're getting there. All right, good. Let's go to Shulchan Aruch. So says Shulchan Aruch, right? As we said, Adam mutar litbol b'yom tov b'tumato, right? As we said, on Yom Tov, a person is allowed to go to the mikveh, no problem. Right? Whether it's a woman or a man, right? It's all the same. Right? It's good. Everything is good. Okay. Right. So here you see, right, that the Ramah doesn't really argue with this, even though he talks about bathing the whole body, that they were stringent regarding that. But regarding the mikveh, he doesn't say that they're stringent, So it seems like even the Ashkenazim, are lenient, and I can tell you, right, that's a custom, because I lived, in many neighborhoods, religious neighborhoods, and the Ashkenazim, they go to the mikveh like crazy, whether it's Yom Tov or Shabbat, they go. They have no problem with that. As we said, right, the only issue is if it's hot or not on Shabbat, right? But otherwise, there's no problem. Okay, good. Let's go to the next one, Daled. Right. So here's an interesting thing, right? It says in the Torah, "En osim mugmar right? So what is mugmar? That's like incense, So what it means to say is, right, you're not allowed to burn incense on Yom Tov. Some people like to do this stuff, right? They like to have a nice smell in their house. So they burn some incense, and the whole house smells like nice, like really, dreamy, right? Whatever. So on Yom Tov, you're not allowed to do this, right? To burn it. So the question is, right? You have to ask, why not? Because you're allowed to make a fire Yom Tov, right? So why can't you burn incense? What's the problem with that? So now we will see. I can tell you myself, but just before, we get into it.
Kabbalah and an
Yeah.
incense candle, if you light it before Yom Tov.
Right. If you light it before, no problem, right? I'm talking about on Yom Tov.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But if it's an incense candle, that's already a different story. We're not really talking about that. We're talking about like real incense,
Yes, I'm familiar with the incense.
Right.
Well, I don't like them on Yom Tov, no, but
Right,
it's
right.
So
that's the
but
story.
The incense candle I do. For the
I'm
smell.
sorry. You what? I'm sorry.
The incense candle I do on Yom Tov, before Yom Tov,
Right. It's like a fragrant candle.
One of those.
Sure. There's no problem with that, obviously, right? Because it's just basically a candle, So in other words, if you do need the light, okay, you're just not lighting it for the smell. Depends on why you're doing it, right? If you're doing it only for the smell, so then it's like incense. It's the same thing, right? You cannot do it on Yom Tov. You could do before.
Oh, okay. So I can light it before Yom Tov, yes?
Oh, sure, no question. Right? But here we're talking about on Yom Tov, right?
No, but you said okay.
Right. So on Yom Tov it's forbidden. But if you're doing, the lighting a candle, not, because you want the light, and the smell also comes, that's okay because, you need the light there. That's not really a problem. Okay, so let's get into it a little bit and see what's going on here.
So I can use the light of that incense candle to light other, to use it as a pre-existing flame?
Sure. What's the problem? Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, you just reminded me, by the way, I have to go buy some memorial candles for the holiday.
I use both because I thought it had to be exactly from the memorial candle, not from.
No. Just the memorial candle, it just lasts longer, that's all,
Okay. Thank you.
It's just more convenient,
Okay.
So okay, good. So says Bet Yosef over here. Right, where's the source for this? Mishnah Hasham, it's in the Mishnah over there. Betzah Chat Bet Amud Bet. Shaban Gam Yom Matir Leaniach Mugmar B'Yom Tov V'Chachamim Osrim. Right, so machloket over here, right? Whether you're allowed to do this, Mishum Dichtiv, because it says Asher Yaseh Lechol Nefesh V'Davar Zeh Eno Shaveh Lechol Nefesh. Right, so what they're saying is, right, the reason why it's not allowed is because not everybody does it, like it's something like, only like, very, like, very sensual people do, right? Incense, things like this, right? Not everybody does this kind of stuff. Maybe one out of, right, 1 out of 20, right? The people are going to put incense. So since it's not really something so common, that's why we don't allow it on Yom Tov. This is the reason why. Right? So it goes on. Right? It's only for spoiled people, People are like, very sensitive, those people, those kinds of guys, right? Or let's say, right? Let's say, he has a bad smell or something, whatever. So he wants to improve the smell in the house. So he says the machloket is only regarding to smell it, but to actually light it, everybody agrees that it's forbidden. לעשן פירות בעשן בסמים לקלוט טעם בושם. So now, right, there's another question in the Gemara there. What's the din, right? Are you allowed to smoke fruit, right, on Yom Tov, all right? Because you wanna get a nice, nice flavor in there, right? So you smoke it, right? Is that allowed to do on Yom Tov? Right. So says Rabbi Yehuda, you cannot do this on the coals, right? Because you're extinguishing the coals. So what does that mean to put it directly on the coals, right? It's forbidden. Al gabe cheretz mutar, but it says if you put it on clay, you're allowed. So the conclusion there is that even it's even allowed to do on the coals. Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. Midi de hava abisa agumre, right? The same thing like to put beat meat on the coals, right? To make them, to roast them. Right? So Ravase also says, right, to smoke. So smoking is allowed, right? To smoke the food to get the flavor in there, or whatever it's called, right? Smoking, steaming, all that stuff, right? Tavaran, Piresh Rashi, al gabe gachelet nami mutar. So Rashi explains over there, right? The ochel nefeshu. So he says, since it's consumption related, that's why you're allowed to do it, right? Even on the coals, even though you're extinguishing it. But awi afleanim. So it's even fitting for the poor. So it's not only for the rich, for the spoiled people. Ela she'enu matsui lahem. But it says they don't have it so much. But right, tzvi b'yom tov, right? So it's considered to be like something where if they have it, they'll do it. So it said in the first paragraph. So it says, what about the prohibition of extinguishing and making a smell, and also the making a fire? So it's allowed. He says, why? Same thing as like meat, right? To agumre, that you're roasting meat, making a barbecue, right? All right, so that you see from there, right? All this discussion. We talked about this before already, but you are allowed to make a barbecue on Yom Tov. There's no problem with that. But as I tell my friends, right, if you're making a barbecue on Yom Tov, just make sure, right, that when you're done, don't extinguish the fire. Just let it go out by itself when you're finished. Because you're not extinguishing for any need. There's no need there to extinguish that. So therefore, you should not. Okay, good. But the Rif holds, right, that when it comes to meat on the coals, there's no extinguishing there. But ממש מותר להניח לבונה על גבי אש והדולק לפי שאין כאן כיבוי שסופו מבעיר. וכיוון שכיבוי אין כאן, הברה אין כאן, משום אולודי ריח נמי לא מצר, כיוון שאינו מכוון להריח אלא להכשיר אוכלים מדי דהבה ביסה הגומה. תכולו איתנו בכיבוי והברה, כי הכא באולודי ריח וגחלים אף על גפי. שאין לנו צורך אוכל נפש, ממש שהיה אפשר לצלות סמוך לגחלים ולא הגבן, עד כאן ישנו הר"ן. So the Ran here explains, right, he goes through all the possibilities of why it could be possibly forbidden, and then he rejects all of them, right, like we already said. So the point is, right, that there's no prohibition here whatsoever. So, right, what does that mean, right? Practically speaking, you're allowed to do smoking, smoking foods, right, whatever, and steaming and things like this, right? To cook the foods, put flavor in them, because this is for consumption. Even though there may be issues, with extinguishing and making a fire, but still, right? Since you're doing it for consumption, it's allowed. There's no prohibition whatsoever. So, ומותח דבריו התבהר לך שמה שכתב ריף גבה דביילן מהו לעשן את הפירות כדי להכשירן לאכילה, וגם הרמב"ם שכתב פרק ד' מותר לעשן תחת הפירות. The Rambam also says, right, that it's allowed to do that. כדי שיוכשרו לאכילה, in order that it should be edible, לאו לממרא דווקא כשנכשרים על ידי עישון זה לאכילה, וזולת העישון לא יהיו ראויים לאכילה. Doesn't mean to say, right, it says here, that it's only allowed because, it's only edible if you smoke it, and otherwise you cannot eat it. אבל אם היו ראויים לאכילה, but if it was edible as is, וקודם לכן, אלא שעל ידי העישון מתעלים יותר, לא על ה... Right, so he says, it's not because the smoking makes it edible, it's because smoking improves the flavor, right, or whatever, so that's, even for that reason it's allowed. לא, אלא אפילו היכא דקודם העישון ראויים לאכילה, כיוון שהעישון מחשיבם יותר, אפשר לדהווה דבר שווה לכל נפש. So he says, the reason why we allow this, as opposed to the, incense, right, which he says is not allowed, is because this is something that everybody does, but incense is only for the spoiled guys, right? Delicate people, right? Whatever, right? Okay, good. So that's the reason why we don't allow that. Good. So almost finished. So I guess we'll just wrap it up here, right? So he says, ויקרא למדק מהי שנה דגבי מוגבר שהרי אפילו בגחלת של עץ ולמתק חרדל, לא שהרי אלא במגחלת של מתכת, כמו שנתבהר בסימן שקודם זה, נראה לי דשני החרדל דהווה אפשר למתקו בעוד יום. So he says, he brings here like a differentiation between two types of using coals, to prepare something. So he says that, regarding our case, we said it's allowed to use the coals for that purpose. But, right, there's another place where it talks about the issue of using coals, right, to sweeten the mustard. Oh, right. You ever tried that before? That's only allowed to use only coals which are made out of metal. So he says, why is that? Here we don't allow, and there we don't allow, and here we do. So he says, because you could have done that before, to sweeten the mustard the day before Yom Tov. You could have done that. So that's the way it is. People do this like, in one shot, right? Like a big amount. Right? But it says when it comes to, smoking fruits, right? That's only done on the same day, right? That's when it has a good flavor, when you do it like fresh. Oh, right. So it says, and in order that the as we said, right, the smell should not diminish. Okay, good. Garcina begema Rabba Rabbi Yosef de Amrit Arbayu sechufe kisa ashira beoma taba asur mishum deka molid recha. Umay shana mimololom meriach bo וקוטמו מריח בו הטם ריחה מהאיתה ואוסופי הדקה מוסיף ריחה אולודה הוא דקה מוליד ריחה. ופרש רש"י, so I read this Gemara, I didn't really understand much of it, so now Rashi will explain, right, what it means. So there we go, right? So Rashi says חופי כיסא השיריים, what is he talking about here? לכפות כוס מבוסם על השיריים. So what you're doing is, right, you're overturning a cup, which is, has a nice fragrance on shiraim shel malbush, right? Like we're talking about, right, clothing, which is worn out clothing. Leachnis mehem reach habosem. So you want to get like, the smell of the, right, of the incense, whatever it is, right, inside your clothing there, right, whatever. Bosem shel kos asur dekab molid recha b'shiraim. So what's the halakha here, right? Are you allowed to do this? To introduce a nice smell, right, into your worn out clothing. So he says it's forbidden. Why is that? Because the problem is, right, that he's making a smell in the clothing, right? And that's not allowed because that smell will last for like quite a long time, So since it lasts, the rabbis forbade that, So, by the way, what does that mean regarding, a woman, right? Let's say, putting perfume on Shabbat, Yom Tov. Is that allowed? Because they're making a smell in their skin, right? So the truth is, that it doesn't last so long, so it is allowed. So you are allowed to put perfume, on Shabbat. There's no problem with that. Or Yom Tov, right? Whatever, same thing. But when you put the smell right into the clothing, it lasts for a long time. Doesn't leave the clothing for a long time. That's why it's not allowed. That's the difference, So that's the story, yeah. Right. So obviously the same thing goes for the man, right? You can put cologne, on Shabbat. There's no prohibition, right? Why am I laughing? Because it says in the halacha that a Talmid Chacham, right, should not put cologne, but a regular guy is allowed to put cologne. So why isn't a Talmid Chacham allowed to put cologne? By the way, what's the reason? Why? Anybody know why? Okay, I'll let you. I'll tell you. Right. So they say with the rabbis, right? He looks suspicious. What's this rabbi? Like he likes to, he's a little bit too liberal. He's a ladies' man. Excuse my language, right? So that's why they say, right, that a rabbi should not put cologne. So that's why, right? If you see me, you're never gonna smell my cologne because I don't use cologne. Okay, but the ladies they can put. But even the ladies, by the way, you should know, right? Even though you can put perfume, but they shouldn't put too much, because if they smell too much, like they get too much attention, so it's like it's not snute, it's not modest, whatever. So they can put a little bit, but don't go crazy with that stuff, what I mean? Otherwise, every man is looking at you, getting too much attention. That's not really good, it's too loud, to try to right, that's the thing. Okay, so I hope you got my drift. Okay. Good.
And what about the culture? For instance, Spanish people love to like bathe themselves in perfume. This is
right. Fragrant bath, right?
Yeah, it's a culture thing, But
Right. So the rabbi shouldn't do it, but the regular guys can do it, no problem, right?
Okay.
I mean, and also as I said, right, even with the ladies, you shouldn't be like sticking up the whole room, you know what I mean?
Like a douche.
It shouldn't be that strong,
Okay.
Otherwise, you're getting too much attention.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, God bless. So, okay, let's see the Shulchan Aruch and we're done. So says Shulchan Aruch, right? And Osin Mugumar, as we said, right? We don't do incense on Yom Tov, right? All the more so on Shabbat, right? Of course, you cannot do. Dehainu lefazer minei besamim al gechalim. So how would they do it, right? They would take these right incense and place it on the coal, right? The coals would burn it, that's what they did. Ben le'ariach ben legamer abayit kelim, right? This is whether you're doing it for whatever your purpose is, right? To make the house smell nice, right? Or whatever, or your the clothing or whatever, you're not allowed to do that. But he says if you're doing it to put flavor into your food, right? Into your fruits, that's allowed, as we said, right? It's consumption related. So for that purpose, you're allowed to do it. And that's all. Also, your house will smell good, also as well, But it's like not the main reason why you're doing it. So that's the thing, right? That's okay. Okay, so the matkan le'achila, right? So mutal afilu im mefazran al gabi kachlet shel etz, right? So it says you're allowed to do that, in order to make the food more delicious, even though it's edible without that. Okay, so it says Rama here, ואסור לסחוב כוס מבוסם על הבגדים משום דמוליד בהם ריחה, right? So as we said, right, that the Rama brings what we just saw in the Beit Yosef, that you're not allowed to, right, using, some kind of a cup, right, fragrant cup, whatever it is, right, to make your clothing smell nice, right? You cannot do that. As we said, right, because you're making a smell there. And as we said, the problem is it lasts a long time, like it'll last for like a day or two, whatever. So, that's the reason why you're not allowed to do it. But as we said, right, on your skin, it's not going to last that long, only a couple of hours, let's say, right? It's no big deal. So, if it doesn't last the whole day, just a couple of hours, you're good. You're okay. Okay, very good. So I guess we'll stop there, Brother Hashem. Very nice. So it looks like we fulfilled our hour, right? Whatever. So we'll see you, Brother Hashem, tomorrow, which will be the last day before the holiday. Thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness, Brother Hashem. And Chazak Baruch, Laila Tov.
Laila Tov. Thank you, Rabbi.
Hope you're getting ready for the holiday. Okay, get ready.
Thank you.
All the best.